You know, my dears, there's a question that kept me awake for 23 years. It's a question I still ask myself on quiet nights when the house is too still and I'm alone with my thoughts. What do you do when the person you've built your entire life with turns out to be a complete stranger? Not a stranger in the small way, not someone who forgets you like your coffee or changes their politics, but a stranger in the way that shatters every single memory you thought was real, every photograph that becomes a lie, every kiss that tastes of deception when you look back on it. They say that marriage is built on trust, and I believe that with all my heart. I was raised to believe it. I lived it. Looking back now, I understand that I was blind, not stupid, my dears, but willfully blind, the way we all are when we don't want to see what's standing right in front of us. We see what we want to see. We believe what we want to believe. And sometimes the truth waits patiently in the darkness until we're forced to turn on the light. Little did I know that one night in February 1987, following nothing more than candlelight and a peculiar silence, my entire world would collapse like a house built on sand. My name is Margaret Eleanor Hartwell, but everyone's always called me Maggie. I'm 76 years old now, and this story happened in 1987, though it took many more years before I found the courage to tell it. Before I continue, my dears, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. I love hearing from people all over the world who found their way to Grandma's diary. Now, let me take you back to a time when my life looked perfect from the outside, the kind of perfect that makes your neighbors jealous and your friends whisper compliments behind their hands. Millbrook was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else's business, which was comforting until it wasn't. We lived on Elm Street, in a beautiful Victorian with white shutters and a wraparound porch that my husband, Robert, we called him Bobby, had painted fresh every other spring. It was 1987, and I'd been married for 23 years. 23 years of what I thought was contentment. 3 children. David, our oldest, was 14 and already talking about becoming a doctor. Catherine was 11 and could sing like an angel. And little James was 8, with his father's dark eyes and the sweetest disposition. Bobby was an accountant at the Millbrook Trust Bank, respected by everyone in town. He wore his suits pressed sharp, his ties perfectly knotted. He'd come home at precisely 5:47 every evening. I knew his schedule the way you know the beating of your own heart. We'd have dinner at 6 o'clock, always. Pot roast on Sundays, meatloaf on Wednesdays. I was the church organist, and Bobby was on the town council. We were invited to everything: the mayor's Christmas party, the bank's annual gala, the garden club's spring luncheons. I kept a home that looked like it belonged in better homes and gardens. My kitchen was my pride yellow gingham curtains, a polished formica counter where I'd knead bread every Friday morning, the smell of yeast and flour rising, the warmth of the oven. That was my meditation. My children were well behaved, well dressed. David wore his school uniform with pride. Catherine took piano lessons. We were the kind of family people pointed to and said, "Now there's stability." But you know, my dears, perfect houses sometimes hide the darkest secrets. Perfect-looking marriages sometimes crumble from the inside like old plaster. And perfect men? Well, sometimes they're the most dangerous kind of all. Looking back now, I can see them so clearly. The moments I pushed aside, the questions I didn't ask, the small inconsistencies I rationalized away because they didn't fit with the life I'd constructed in my mind. That it started small. Bobby began working late, not often, just occasionally. Special audit at the bank, he'd say, kissing the top of my head. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was an accountant. Audits happened, but then Catherine asked one evening, "Mommy, why does Daddy have that smell on him when he comes home late?" She was 8 then. "What smell, darling?" I asked. "Like perfume, but not your perfume." I dismissed it. The bank had a new receptionist. He'd been standing near her desk. That's all. Then there were the missing items. Small things. $200 from the envelope I kept for the church building fund. My good pearls, the ones my mother gave me, disappearing from my jewelry box, only to mysteriously reappear 2 weeks later, never explained. When I asked Bobby about the money, he said he'd taken it for an investment opportunity. Something that didn't work out, he said, and I let it go. I shouldn't have let it go. The phone calls were next. Late at night, around midnight, it would ring. Bobby would stumble out of bed, go downstairs. I'd lie there listening to the murmur of his voice through the floor. That low, urgent tone I'd never heard him use with me. When he'd return to bed, I'd pretend to be asleep. "Who was that?" I finally asked one night. "Work emergency," he'd said. But the bank didn't handle emergencies at midnight, did they? I told myself I was being paranoid. That's what women did back then, didn't we? We made ourselves smaller. We convinced ourselves that our instincts were wrong, that trust was more important than truth. We were taught that a good wife doesn't pry, doesn't question, doesn't accuse her husband of things without proof. Who would have thought that my obedience, my loyalty, my willingness to believe him would cost me everything? February 14th, 1987. Valentine's Day. Bobby had been distant all that week. No special dinner plans. No card that year. Catherine had the real flu. The kind that kept her in bed with a fever. David was at a school basketball game. James was already asleep. I'd given Bobby a gift that morning, a new watch. Something he'd mentioned wanting, and he'd seemed distracted, uncomfortable, like he wanted to escape the moment. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house had that particular quiet that sometimes keeps you awake instead of lulling you to sleep. Around 11 p.m., I got up to check on Catherine, to bring her more water and fever medicine. As I was coming back down the hallway, I saw it. A thin line of orange light coming from beneath the basement door. Candlelight. Bobby never went to the basement. He hated the basement, said it was damp and musty. He was afraid of spiders. The candlelight flickered. My hand moved toward the doorknob almost of its own accord. My dears, some part of me already knew. Some part of me was ready to shatter. The basement stairs creaked under my feet. I was wearing my blue nightgown, thin cotton, and the cold of the basement air went right through me. The candlelight was coming from the far corner, where the old workbench was, behind the furnace. I could hear something then, a sound I can't describe adequately even now. A rhythmic creaking, a woman's breath, quick and urgent. My husband's voice, a version of it I'd never heard. I stepped around the furnace, and what I saw. My dears, what I saw in that candlelight, it unmade me. My own husband, my Bobby, was with Father Michael Hennessy, our parish priest. They were on a bed I'd never seen before, a proper bed set up behind the furnace like a secret room. And Father Michael, who blessed my children, who preached about virtue every Sunday, he was wearing my blue silk dress, the one I'd worn to David's school graduation. My mother's pearls were round his neck. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stood there, frozen, as Bobby noticed me. His face went white, actually white, like the blood drained from it completely. For a moment, we all just stared at each other in that candlelight. Margaret, Bobby said, and the word came out broken. This isn't. I can explain, but that wasn't even the worst of it. As I stood there, pieces started clicking together. The perfume smell, the missing money, the phone calls. I remembered something then, a business card I'd found in his jacket pocket months ago. Not a bank card, a card for a small investment firm downtown. I'd never heard of it. I'd tucked it back and forgotten about it. You're not having an affair, I heard myself say. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from someone else. You're involved with Father Hennessy, but there's more, isn't there? There has to be more. Bobby looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something I'd never seen before. Not love, not guilt, resignation, like he'd been waiting for this moment, had almost been relieved by it. Maggie, I've made some mistakes, he said. He wasn't even denying it. With investments, the money I took from you, it wasn't for what I said. The bank. I've been taking money from the bank for 4 years. not just small amounts. I'm into the accountant's fund for nearly $300,000. The room tilted. I had to grab onto the workbench. Father Hennessy knew. I whispered. He's been helping me hide it. Bobby said flatly. That's how we became close. $300,000. That was an unfathomable number. That was federal crime territory. That was prison dock the next morning. Bobby was gone. He left a note on the kitchen table beside my empty coffee cup. I'm sorry. I can't face what's coming. By the time you read this, I'll have left town. Don't try to find me. I called the police that afternoon. What choice did I have? By evening, federal agents were in my living room asking me questions about my husband's embezzlement. By the next day, it was in the Millbrook Gazette. Local accountant flees after embezzlement discovered. They didn't mention Father Hennessy yet. That came later, in a separate scandal that nearly destroyed the Catholic Church in our county. The humiliation was absolute, my dears, comprehensive, complete. I lost my job at the church within a week. We've decided to go in a different direction, Rever and Matthew said, not meeting my eyes. I'd been the organist for 15 years, but I was Bobby's wife, and Bobby had betrayed everything they held sacred. I was guilty by association, though I'd done nothing but love a liar. Our house was seized as part of the civil proceedings. We had 30 days to move out. The furniture was considered part of the marital assets, so I was left with almost nothing. I packed suitcases while the children watched me with confused, frightened eyes. "Where is Daddy?" little James asked. Daddy had to go away. I told him, and I hated myself for lying. But what else could I do? The community's response was swift and merciless. Women who'd been my friends stopped returning my calls. The mother of David's best friend forbade her son from playing with him anymore. At the grocery store, I'd see Mrs. Eleanor Blackwell, the mayor's wife, a woman I'd had lunch with weekly turn away when she saw me coming down the aisle. There were whispers that followed me like a shadow. His wife didn't know, people said, and the implication was clear. Either I was stupid or I was complicit. The bank accounts were frozen. There would be restitution payments that would take decades. I had 3 children to feed, a mortgage I couldn't pay, and no job. My parents were gone. Bobby's family wanted nothing to do with me or the children. We were tainted with Bobby's sin. As if betrayal was contagious, Catherine developed anxiety. She'd have nightmares. David became withdrawn, stopped talking about becoming a doctor. He was 14 and angry, so angry at his father for what he'd done to us. James would ask where his father was over and over, as if the answer might change if he just asked enough times. We moved into a small rental cottage on Maple Street, not in the nice part of town. The ceiling leaked when it rained. The radiators clanked all night. I had $92 in my checking account and no prospects. No one would hire me. I was Bobby Hartwell's wife, and that was a scarlet letter. But I had hands. I had a back that could bend. I had a will that refused to break. Though there were nights I came very close to breaking it deliberately. I started washing other people's clothes. Not officially cash in hand. No records. I'd pick up laundry from 5 different houses every Monday. Wash it in my ancient washing machine in the basement. Fold it carefully and return it by Thursday. The work was hard on my hands, my dears. My fingers became raw, cracked. The skin between my knuckles developed deep fissures that bled in the winter. I'd wrap them in bandages and do another load. My lower back, which had never troubled me before, began to ache so fiercely that I'd have to sit down sometimes and just breathe through it. I made bread, sourdough, rye, whole wheat. I'd bake it in my oven. The kitchen was the one room in that cottage that felt like mine. And I'd sell loaves to the organic shop that had just opened downtown. The owner was a woman named Ruth, maybe 5 years younger than me. She didn't know my history, or if she did, she didn't care. She'd buy whatever I brought her. 20 loaves a week, sometimes more. At 50 cents a loaf, that was $10. In 1987, that mattered. I made jams, strawberry, raspberry, blackberry, whatever fruit was on sale. I'd spend Saturday afternoons standing over a hot stove, stirring and stirring, the steam rising up and making my face flush red. My hands were perpetually sticky, permanently stained purple and red. David would come into the kitchen and watch me work, and I could see him measuring his childhood against this new reality, trying to understand how quickly a life could change. "Can I help?" he asked one Saturday. "You should be outside," I said gently. "You should be with friends." "I don't have friends anymore," he said quietly. That broke something in me. I taught him to make jam. Catherine I taught to tutor the neighborhood children in math and reading. By 1989, she was making $8 an hour, which she immediately gave to me. James, too young to work, took responsibility for keeping the cottage as clean as possible. He'd sweep and organize, and his seriousness about this task nearly destroyed me. These children were becoming adults too quickly, robbed of their innocence by their father's lies. I cleaned houses. Starting in 1988, I'd go to the large homes on the north side of town, the ones the wealthy people lived in. I'd scrub their bathrooms, polish their silver, dust the photographs of their perfect families. The irony wasn't lost on me, my dears. I was cleaning other people's beautiful lives while mine lay in ruins. My knuckles became permanently swollen from gripping cleaning supplies. My knees hurt from kneeling on hard tile. but I earned $30 a house, and I could do 3 houses a day if I moved fast enough. $90. That was rent for another few days. By 1990, I'd begun to expand beyond the individual homes. I approached the 2 doctors in town, offered to clean their offices in the early mornings before they opened. They were skeptical at first. I was Bobby Hartwell's wife. After all but their current cleaning service had fallen through, and I came cheap. I worked efficiently. I didn't talk much. I just cleaned. I was always exhausted. There were mornings I'd wake up and for a moment, just a moment, I'd forget what my life had become. Then reality would crash back. My lower back would remind me. My cracked hands would remind me. The small, cold cottage would remind me. But something was happening too. Something I hadn't expected. The bread business grew. Ruth wanted more loaves, and I began delivering to other shops. People started asking for my jams by name. A small bistro downtown owned by a younger couple just starting out asked if I'd supply their bread daily. It was still poverty wages, my dears, but it was a thread of legitimacy. It was the beginning of something. It happened on a Sunday in March 1991. I was at the grocery store. I'd started allowing myself a small shopping trip each week if I was careful, and Mrs. Eleanor Blackwell approached me. My heart sank. She'd been the architect of much of my social destruction, but her face wasn't cruel today. Maggie, she said, and her voice was different, softer. I heard you make the bread at Rosario's, the one with the rosemary and olive oil. Yes, I said cautiously. It's extraordinary, she said. I've been buying it for 2 months. I didn't realize it was you until someone mentioned it. I didn't know what to say. I've been thinking about you, Eleanor continued. She was a tall woman, always perfectly put together. But today I noticed the fine lines around her eyes, the way she held herself, about what happened, about how I treated you. I was cruel, Maggie. I was cruel, and I've regretted it. Right there in the grocery store. Mrs. Eleanor Blackwell, the mayor's wife, the woman I'd seen turn away from me 100 times, looked directly into my eyes and apologized. Your husband's sins aren't yours, she said. I should have known that then. I'm sorry it took so long for me to understand. She said this loudly enough that several people heard her. And something shifted, my dears. Something fractured in the narrative they'd constructed around me. If Eleanor Blackwell could forgive, could admit wrongdoing, then maybe the rest of the town could too. From 1991 to 1998, everything changed. Slowly at first, then with gathering momentum, like a snowball rolling downhill. I registered my business officially, Maggie's Bread and Preserves. I rented a small commercial kitchen in 1993. This was huge. This meant I could finally leave behind the makeshift operation in my cottage. By 1994, I had employees, two women who helped me with baking, another who handled the preserves. We supplied 15 restaurants and shops across 3 counties. David graduated high school in 1991. And yes, my dears, he became a doctor. Johns Hopkins Medical School. He worked through school, gave me money when he could, but he became a doctor. Catherine became a high school math teacher. James became a software engineer, a career that didn't even really exist when he was born. But he was the smartest of them all. I always said so. In 1995, the children gave me a gift. We'd saved enough, between the 3 of them and me, for a down payment on a small house, not the Victorian on Elm Street that had been sold to cover some of the restitution, but a nice little cottage with 3 bedrooms, a big kitchen, a yard where I could grow herbs. It had a basement without dark secrets. I was recognized by the local Chamber of Commerce in 1998. They called me one of the region's most successful entrepreneurs. There was a photograph in the newspaper of me at a banquet, and I was smiling, really smiling, not the tight smile of someone holding on, but a genuine smile of someone who'd made it through. The grandchildren started arriving around 2000. David's twins, Catherine's daughter, James's 2 boys. I held them in my arms, and I marveled at how far I'd come, how far we'd all come. Bobby died in 2003, a heart attack in Portland, Oregon, where he'd been living under an assumed name. He'd never served his full prison sentence. He'd cooperated with authorities, testified against Father Hennessy. He'd lived a quiet, isolated life. He'd never remarried. When I heard the news, I felt something complicated move through me. Not forgiveness, exactly, but something like closure, like the final chapter was written. That my dears, people often ask me what the lesson is. How did you survive? How did you keep going? And I tell them the truth. I didn't have a choice. My children needed me. They couldn't lose both their parents to this disaster. So I put one foot in front of the other, day after day, even when my feet were bleeding into my shoes. I made bread because bread nourished people, and nourishing people was something I could still do. I made jam because taking bitter, broken fruit and turning it into something sweet was its own kind of alchemy. But also, my dears, I survived because people showed me kindness when I needed it most. Ruth, the shop owner, who never asked questions, who just bought my bread. Eleanor Blackwell, who had the courage to apologize publicly. The elderly woman who lived across the street from our cottage, Mrs. Patterson, who'd leave casseroles on my porch and pretend they were mistakes. These small kindnesses, they held me together when I thought I was falling apart. I learned that people are capable of terrible betrayals, yes, but I also learned that people are capable of remarkable courage and unexpected grace. I learned that a woman can be knocked down and still get back up. That your children are watching how you handle devastation. And the example you set matters more than any inheritance you could leave them. Looking back now, at 76 years old, surrounded by grandchildren, and a business that employs 30 people. I don't regret my suffering. Not exactly. But I'm grateful for what it taught me. That strength isn't about never falling. It's about having the will to stand back up. The darkness I followed that night in February 1987 led me somewhere I never expected. It led me through devastation, yes, but it also led me home, not to a place, but to myself, to a woman who could survive anything, to a woman who could make something beautiful from the ashes of her life. That's what I want you to know, my dears. Whatever you're facing, whatever secret is sitting in your basement, waiting for candlelight to illuminate it, you are stronger than you believe you are. You will survive it, and you will build something beautiful on the other side. Thank you for listening to me today. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next stories. Share with someone who might be needing a little hope. Where are you watching from? Leave it in the comments. I read every single one, and I'm grateful for each of you. God bless.